you Zool? No. I'm definitely not the Keymaster. Sup kids, what up? It's your boy, Yeah Concrete. No, that's terrible. You can't start the show like that. Imagine if that was what this was like all the time. Can you imagine? It's crazy to me that people on YouTube maintain that level of, I don't know, outward personality all the time. I don't know, it almost now it sounds nihilistic. Like they're saying it, but they don't really believe it. Like, it's your boy. It just doesn't work. It doesn't, like, I can't balance it. Can you imagine the mental health of people who do have to maintain that? This is why I feel sorry for a lot of celebrities and a lot of influencers. They make these, I don't know, gimmicks or something, and it just doesn't land. But that's a whole topic for another podcast. That I may as well cover when I eventually cover me 10 years ago, which I will do probably at some point in this year. But how are you? It's 2022. It's January 2022. This is the week before this goes up. I'm actually to say I've got a lot of guest podcasts recorded. The solo podcast I haven't actually touched in 2022 because I was leaving them off a little bit. I was giving myself a little bit of space, and I thought, hey, let me just move my mic a little bit. I thought, hey, we'll come back and we'll do it on the day. We'll do it. Fuck it, we'll do it live. We're gonna do it live. And I've got a list of topics, as I always do. You know, ones which you can jump off on, and I think we're going to do that in such a way that we can just, you know, look at the world in a slightly negative light in the first episode. Because why not? That's how we should start the year, shouldn't we? We should start it as we mean to go on, which is slightly negative, I guess. I don't know. It could be an interesting year, as we discussed in the previous podcast. 2021 turned out to be a hell of a year for just general progress, but also not progress at the same time, because we're all still putting our lives on hold. But something which came up in that conversation reminded me of a point which I wanted to discuss and a point which I wanted to make, which was Martin, who's my brother. He was discussing this whole idea of how people have come out of lockdown and basically just been terrible people, you know, how they somehow forgot how to be part of the society, how they forgot how to treat customer service people and hospitality people and people who work in front-facing jobs and all these kinds of things, you know, doctors, nurses, whatever. Somehow they forgot. It's almost like they spent a year or two in their own space and really got inside their heads to when they came out, they were just like, oh, right, I don't know how to do this. I'm just going to be a dick about everything. And it reminded me that a lot of what I've seen within the pandemic and within people being in lockdown is regression, right? And that's true. It's just a point of fact. And a lot of us did it, and we did it because it's safety. And you do it when you go back to your parents' house. You see it all the time. Someone will go back to their parents and you know, chill out for a little bit, and within a couple of hours they will take on traits of more teenage selves. It's never like full child self. It's never like swaddled in blankets and, you know, suckling. It's never that level of regression, but it's some level of, oh, you know, I'm a teenager again, so fuck my parents, and I want to rebel, and I wanted to go do this, and this is what I'm interested in. You need to listen to this, and everything else you say is wrong. It's just wrong. And that's, yeah, that level of regression, and that bothers me, because one of the major gripes in my world, I don't have many gripes in this world. You're lying, Graham. You have like 170 something episodes of gripes in the world. Actually, you know, that's not actually true, because there's guests involved, and a lot of those guest ones aren't gripey at all. They're just people talking about things they're passionate about, and that's fantastic. The ones in between are gripes. So I mean, if we have that, what's half of 170? It's like 85, right? Double 80 is 160 plus the 5. Yep, it's 170 is 85. So I got like 85 gripes in the world. That's not that many. I don't think there's a lot of things in the world. I could gripe about a lot more things. I probably will, because nothing's going to stop me, as we established in the trailer, which I released. You should check out the trailer. The trailer's good. I'm pretty proud of the trailer. Anyway, I've got enough point. How far can I get off point in one podcast in 4 minutes without even thinking? I'll go as far as I want, because this is my damn show and I talk about whatever I want, except for when there's guests there, because the guests come on and they talk about their thing. We need to slow this down. Anyway, So one of the things which really bothers me within the world, if there's a lot of things which bother me in the world, but one of the things which gets to me and gets to me in such a way that it triggers a certain type of behavior in myself is this idea of gatekeeping. And by gatekeeping, what do you mean, Grim? Well, I'm going to tell you, audience. What I mean by gatekeeping is people who basically come out into the world and they say, you can't do this because of this, right? And it's not like you can't do this, you can't wear gloves because you don't have hands. It's not that kind of level of like logic. It's, you can't wear gloves because you have the wrong length fingers. Now, finger length is varied on a pretty large scale. People have small fingers, people have big fingers. Having hands would present problems because there'd be no glove would be able to fit on it. It'd be more like mittens. So you could wear mittens but not gloves. This is a weird route to take it down. So I'm going to move quickly away from it as fast as I can. But gatekeeping is this thing, and you see it a lot. And I think it's almost become the full prevalence of what the internet is, but also it's become out more during the pandemic of seeing people take subjects and just really like defend them against everybody, even when it's not necessary to. So what really triggered this thought was I was scrolling through YouTube, as I do. So one of the ways I find guests, and this may interest you, is one of the ways I find guests is by looking at YouTube searches and looking at Instagram searches and Facebook searches and all kinds of different searches. But they're always aimed at people with lower viewership. Right. This is one of the tricks which I use to find guests is people with low viewership, and it's because they're the people who aren't getting the attention. They're not the people who are sitting there doing the thing and they're just not getting the attention. So I want to bring a little bit of that to them where I can. I'm not a huge platform, but they're also more accessible because people don't have agents, they don't have production companies. They're people who, when they respond to you, they are responding to you. This is one of the main challenges I face with trying to get bigger guests is I have to go through a whole process of, got to email an agent, got to wait 2 months, that agent's not going to email me back. Or they may email me back and they'll just say no. And that's fine, that's their prerogative. But I've never spoken to the actual person involved, which means I've never had a chance to explain the concept. And when most people hear the concept, they're like, actually, yeah, that sounds interesting. So, yeah, they're gatekeeping, but they're gatekeeping their client. They're gatekeeping for the protection of their client because their job is to make their client money. Which I completely understand is probably not going to make anybody money. Certainly doesn't make me any money. Anyway, but I stumbled across a series of YouTube videos which was all about goth, right? Goth culture. And it was always all about how to be goth and how to dress goth and how to listen goth. And the videos were literally labeled how to dress goth, what goth music to listen to, what it means to be goth, and it was so broken down to find into such a level that it was almost like they were trying to write a handbook on how to be goth. Now, if you don't know, goth is a subculture. Goth is a subculture which is formed through fashion, literature, music. It's a wide-ranging thing, and there's also subcultures within gothicness. You know of gothicness if you know of vampires and you know of Nosferatu and Dracula. That's goth. It also leads back to like medieval times and medieval buildings. There's so many things which have been labeled goth. But when it came to this specifically, it was about goth subculture, the alternative subculture, and it was just like they were trying to write this doctrine, and it fully reminded and triggered me of being a teenager and being. I'm an alternative kid, always have been, and I've had this conversation. I've had this conversation with other alternative people of them trying to stop other people defining themselves as goth because they didn't meet goth in their standards, which is insane. I'm just going to say that straight out. I've been on dates. I've been on a date with a gothic lady, and I can't remember what the exact conversation was, but essentially something along the lines of, I'd said something like, oh yeah, I defined myself as a goth, or I was trying to define myself as a goth at the time. And she just turns to me and went, you're not goth. I was like, well, why? Comparatively, the two of us, she was dressed in a more formal, over-the-top style of goth. Me, I was there in my black jeans, black shirt, and I think I might have been in my bowler hat and chains at the time, but that kind of level of casual effort. And she said, you're not goth, you don't dress goth enough. I'm like, oh, you're one of those people. You're one of those people, and this whole channel. But that's a huge problem within that community of people trying to oust other people because they don't want their style of goth to be diluted by other people in the world. No, fuck it, man. You wear a black T-shirt, and you know who what is the word? My Dying Bride are, and you're goth. in my opinion, if you define yourself as goth, you are goth. Because the stupid thing about that one as well is that there's so many styles of goth. You have like romantic goths, horror goths, psych goths, and it just goes on and on and on. There's even like a tracksuit goth. There's like track wear, like in Adidas and like trainers and stuff like that. You don't have to be wearing New Rocks and a leather jacket to be defined as goth. You just have to have a certain style. If anything, goth's more of like an attitude to the world, not what you're interested in doing. But this also plays into what reels on Instagram have become now. That what I get advertised a lot of is goth people and goth models, essentially. And there's this whole idea of aesthetic on Instagram, and aesthetics and dressing and aesthetics, but not actually researching anything else, just the aesthetic, like cottage car and all this kind of stuff. It's people really delving into just surface level interest in things of like, I like how that looks, I'm going to wear that, doesn't matter where it came from, I like how that looks, which is crazy because when you consider the amount of feedback and reaction which has been to kind of cultural appropriation in the last 10 years, that this as a trend kicking off has become just a thing. But I've gone completely off point. We knew it was going to happen. We knew we were going to go. But it got me thinking about that. And it's one of my major gripes, because essentially all gatekeeping is, when you ground it down, is when someone has something they're interested in, whatever they're interested in, and they are desperately searching for some way to feel like they are the best at the thing that they are interested in. And one, that's a little sad, because the way in which they do that is by forcing other people out. Not being the best at something in the sense of, I know the most thing about this author, or I know the most thing about this idea, or how to dress this way, or the way to listen to music and all that kind of thing. Because it goes beyond that, because not only do they know all those things, but they're using it to put other people down. And you find this a real huge amount when you're trying to get into a new hobby or a new industry, of people just looking at you like you are nothing, you are disgraceful, you don't know this. So there's a couple of examples I found on kind of Urban Dictionary, and used Doctor Who as like one of the main points, and I thought that was really interesting because Doctor Who is one of these fan bases which has a huge level of gatekeeping, because you can be into Doctor Who, and you can be into Tennant, and you can be into the new seasons and the reboots, and you'll meet someone who's like, oh, but you've not seen the old stuff. Oh, you're not a real fan then. You're not a real fan. I'm sorry. I'm not a real fan. I think I choose what I'm a fan of. Perhaps I'm just a fan of the new stuff. Perhaps, Doctor Who as a whole isn't conglomerate that I need to be able to recite everything about the world. You see, there's a couple of other examples. I could list examples for years and years and years. Intellect is another thing. People who use their intellect in order to put other people down, but offer no solution on how to learn or understand what they're talking about. Mathematics and science and philosophy and all these things, of people like, oh, well, you haven't read this book. Oh, you're not real then, because you haven't gone. Maybe I've never encountered that damn book. Maybe I've never had an opportunity to study advanced algebra. Maybe I've never been interested in studying advanced algebra. But I can be a fan of science and technology. I can be a fan of Dante and Sartre and Lucien and all these different philosophers, but I don't have to have read every book under the sun. I'm just not an expert in those fields, as it were. And your expertise in those fields doesn't make you any better than anyone, because this is the true core of this, right? This is the true core of when you get people who are just, they're not even actually interested in the subject anymore. That's the idea. It's like grammar Nazis as well. Like, you're not interested in preserving or protecting what you're suggesting that you're a fan of. What you're actually doing is just looking for a way to feel like you're better than somebody else. And I can understand it, especially when it comes to niche subjects. I can completely understand it, because when you're feeling insecure, when you're feeling, a little rejected by the world, and you find something which you can actually take an interest in, something which actually sparks you, and we've discussed the spark on previous podcasts, but it's when you actually kind of come along to it and you say, oh, wow, you actually, I could be really into pencils, like super into pencils. I started researching pencils, and then I started collecting them, and maybe I could get a few more. Maybe I could learn about the origins of pencils, and maybe I could, get into, visiting workshops and going to see pencil manufacturers, and we could have a little group about which pencils are best for which things, and all these kinds of stuff. But then there's like a tipping point where at some point in your brain you're going to be like, oh, well, other people, this was getting me attention. This was getting me attention for being the best. Other people want to come in and encroach on that, and they've suggested that these ideas are different to mine. I don't like that. I don't like that, so I'm going to put them down. I'm going to put them down, I'm going to bully them, I'm going to define that my way is the exclusive way, and the exclusive way is the only way in which you can do things within the pencil world. So therefore, you are nothing but a reject and a loser. And I'm going to reject you before you reject me. I've been a fan of a few things in my lifetime. When I was a child, I was into Warhammer, Magic the Gathering, big nerdy subjects like that, and it's rife. It's rife in those communities. Gatekeeping is one of the worst, most toxic things. Gatekeeping is not even, I wouldn't even say it's a symptom of bullying. It's like a tool of bullying. And that pisses me off because I've been bullied. And it's just one of these major graphs. But what I find is, because I see it as well in kind of the art communities and just different background materials, music. There's all these kind of different people who try to gatekeep subjects in such a manner, and it's just all it is. Yeah, it's just a sense of superiority defining a niche term that can only be clarified by a few people. That's all it is. It's just getting it down so it can be clarified by a few people you deem worthy of your praise when you become a gatekeeper. And it really triggers a certain type of behavior in me, and I've noticed it in such a major way. And I think it's that part of me which is a troll. It's poking the bear. And I'll discuss this further in another episode. But what happens is when I encounter someone who is gatekeeping, and this is my advice to you, should you encounter someone who's gatekeeping, and now please bear in mind that this may get you in more trouble than you want, but at the same time, you'll be a lot more happy and more comfortable, and you can still be interested in the thing you wanted to be interested in. This is my ending point, which we'll get to in a little bit. You can still be interested in the thing you wanted to, but here's how it goes. So you encounter someone who is gatekeeping you. I'm going to paint a picture in my head. So, let's say Sylvester. Let's say Sylvester's into poetry. Super into poetry, even literature. Let's go wider. Literature happens to be the editor of some magazine. I don't even know. Like Sylvester, you can automatically picture. It's a cat's name. It shouldn't be a human's name. I was thinking Rupert initially, but I've gone with Sylvester. Sylvester works. So Sylvester's editor of this magazine, and you come along and you say to him, "Oh, I'd love to get into your magazine about, I don't know, something crazily niche like jugs of the 19th century." I mean, I realise that sounds like a pornography, but it's not. I'm talking like antique jugs. Not old ladies. I'm digging a hole. We're still going to do jugs. Screw it. So jugs of the 19th century, and Sylvester, who is editor of the Jugs of the 19th Century magazine, says, "Oh, that's interesting. Oh, cool. We can get you invested in that." And then you start talking because you're passionate about it, and you finally met someone who is also passionate about jugs, and you get into it and you say, "Oh, yeah, well, I really like these jugs, and I like these jugs by Belafonte Defoe." And Belafonte Defoe used to make these crazy jugs which were just slightly curved at the spout, and that's what you really like about it. And Sylvester laughs to themselves and goes, "Ha ha ha ha, well, that's not a real jug." Now, at this point, this is where you should notice, right? When someone says, "Well, that's not," and follows it up with some blatant disregarding sentence, that's when you should kind of kick in and your brain should kick in. If someone is attempting to gatekeep, what you need to do is call them on it almost instantaneously, but you don't even have to call them on it like directly. You could just slide in other sly comments, because essentially what you want to do when you encounter a gatekeeper is irritate them. Irritate them. That's what you want to do. That's the key to it, because their entire confidence and their entire self-worth is now invested in this one topic, and you don't even have to be right. all you can do is just make wild, outlandish statements. Like, oh, well, I agree that Bella Foster, maybe those jokes aren't particularly real jokes. But even then, you just pick one of the people which Sylvester is into like, John. I'm picking things from my room. Priceria. We're going to go with John Priceria. John Priceria's drugs weren't real drugs either, because technically they're a cup. And you just watch Sylvester's face gradually increase to a smile because he thinks he's going to land something down on you. But then you just cut in and you just keep going. And you essentially gatekeep by using nonsense. Just start gatekeeping complete nonsense. Start bringing up topics which aren't even related. Oh, well, you like jokes. Well, I bought this plate the other week, but it's also by John... I've forgotten his name. John Priceria. And he, I believe that could actually be a joke because... X, Y, and Z. And I've read this book and this book and just start writing, mentioning books which just don't exist. All you want to do is irritate them because this is what they're thriving off. They're thriving off the confidence that they know they can technically outwit you or that they can hold on to their precious little protected gem. And you're not even trying to destroy it. All you're doing is just irritate them, And you want to irritate them to such a point that they show their true colours. Because as soon as they irritate to such a point where then they show their true colours, they are going to break. And when they break, they're going to do one of two things. They're going to either retaliate against you in such a way that shows that they are gatekeeping to the rest of the audience of people, or they're just going to die a little inside. And they can die a little inside, but at which point you can just extend the olive leaf and be, hey, it's okay. Maybe you just need to loosen up, lighten up about these things. It's okay to protect things as well. I don't want it to be misinterpreted. It's okay to protect things. And I realize safe spaces exist for a reason, to keep certain people out. Because when those people are involved, people don't feel safe. But you can't gatekeep the topic, which is now my final point as we kind of get to the end of this, is... Once you've done this, once you encounter gatekeeping, a lot of people get put off topics, I'd say art's one of those big ones as well when it comes to this, writing and all those kinds of jags. The amount of times I've been told my grammar is terrible, and it's like, I know my grammar's terrible. It's like, oh, so you're not a real writer because you don't understand grammar. It's like, all right, if I'm not a real writer, then I haven't written 2 books and 2 comic books. Maybe, I guess they're not writers. I guess we'll just call them, illustrations with notes. I'm happy to call that. I'm a note taker. I'm not a writer. I'm a note taker. And it's hard to brush off, and I realize it's hard to brush off because it's a shot at you, and it comes across really personal. When really you can reflect it on, really it's just a showing of who they are. It's showing their insecurity, showing how much life they have dedicated to this one topic, to a point where they are now nervous about other people usurping that, not realizing at all that you shouldn't ever try and put yourself in a point of superiority. In fact, if there's one rule I have within my life, and I think I mentioned this a few times on streams, it's just I never want to be in a position where I feel like I'm putting myself above anybody else. If anything, I'm always going to try and put myself at the same level or under you in any conversation we have. And that's why I think conversation is so important, because you need to be able to do that. You need to be able to have that in order to have a dialogue and have a guest and talk about something which is going on. You don't want to be gatekeeping. I don't want to be gatekeeping, mainly because it makes me feel shit and it makes you feel shit. So what is even the point of it? There is no point in it. You can have interests and you can have defined points and things which you are fairly certain on, but you have to remember that they're opinions. They're not, factual, written down rules, because there is technically no rules when it comes to things. What I'm saying is, I realize it can be a hard point to get past. It can be a point which drags you down a little bit, and I've seen it and I've witnessed it, and hell, I'm a victim of it at times as well, not being able to paint, or telling myself not to paint and telling myself not to write. But all you really have to do is just redefine it. Start your own thing. Start your own thing with the things which you think should be core to whatever subject or topic you're interested in. If you're into writing and someone's telling you you're not a real writer, then don't be a writer. Write all you want. Write everything. Write like you were a writer, or a real writer as they would define it, and just call yourself something else. Wait for someone else to define you as a writer. It doesn't fucking matter. It doesn't matter if you define yourself as an artist. Oh, you're an artist. But you're not a real artist because you don't do oil paints, and you don't digitally paint, and you don't do all these kinds of things, and you don't have this, and this. It's like, okay, well, cool. Well, then maybe I'm not an artist. Maybe I'm just a creator. Maybe I just create things with an artistic flair, and maybe I'm gonna pinch and I'm gonna squeeze and I'm gonna take little parts of the thing which you're gatekeeping, and I'm gonna apply it to absolute nonsense until you realize how ridiculous your argument is. That was a little threatening. Apologies for that if you were looking directly in the camera. That's essentially my approach to the art world, which you're seeing. It's just get invested in the parts of it that you like and disconnect from people who are gatekeeping. That's the purest point. That's how I got out of, I guess, goth. Like we discussed it previously. I dress still pretty alternative. Most of the music I listen to is alternative, but I wouldn't necessarily define myself as a goth. I'm not, defined that way, and I have no interest in defining myself, and I have no interest in defining myself in these ways anymore, because at the time when I wanted to, all I was really doing was searching for an identity. And this is something to remember about gatekeepers too, is just they're searching for an identity. They're lost, and they are tragically lost to a point where they have just succumbed to the worst parts of it. And when I was a teenager, I wanted to be goth. I wanted to be niche. I wanted to be, that little bit of better than someone else, because everything I'd been told was that I was shit and I was awful and I wasn't going to do well in life. So having something which I was good at, something I was interested in, gave me a sense of purpose. And that's what you do as a teenager. You find the things which you're interested in, and you find the things which really drive you, and at some point you can let go of those. At some point you can, and you should, because it's the healthier thing to do. So I let go, and I don't define myself as a goth. I still dress pretty fucking gothy, and I still listen to a lot of music which you would classify as goth. But to the goth community, I'm not goth, and that's fine, because I have no interest in it. I have no interest in just being labelled under that community. Call me a friend of the community, an ally of the community. I'm not a real writer. I'm a friend of writers. It's kind of like saying I'm the artist's artist, which I don't mind as a title, but that's what I'm into. I'm into things which make me passionate and things which make me interested, and that's always going to be the way. And I think that's a better way of approaching it than trying to be the best. There's that point, as a lyric which I'll end this with, which is kind of off point, but there's a lyric from Scroobius Pip, which is, he's on about rapping, and it's something along the lines of, if your only goal is to be as good as Scroobius Pip, as soon as you achieve that, your standards will slip. And I think that's true. And I think gatekeepers are people who let their standards strip, because they get to a certain point and they have to define what that point is, and they're not going to move past it. And they don't want you to move past it. They don't want you to grow, and they don't want you to evolve. And you can do so much more if you just learn to get past the gatekeeper. Be your own key master. Tell me about the things you've been gatekeeped on, and I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.